Hi, and welcome to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Chris Gorski.
Today is September 10th, and we're on page 29 in your magazines. Today our article is entitled, Overwhelmed by Overtourism.
Now, the word overwhelmed here means that there is so much going on and so much happening, it might be difficult for you to feel at peace or calm. And overtourism, of course, we just have lots of people visiting a small place. Karen, I have to ask you, since COVID, have you experienced any type of overtourism in your life?
I have just stayed in Taiwan since COVID, so I haven't had much opportunity to see anything like that.
Interesting. So not long ago, I was in the United States. Actually, with Bruce, we were not in the same place. We tried to meet up, but we just missed each other for the solar eclipse. And we were close to Niagara Falls, and everyone gathered for this. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to get exactly to Niagara Falls because of the traffic going into that little tiny location.
Oh.
Bruce happened to be there, and he says it was like being packed like sardines, which is a saying in English, meaning everybody was standing very close shoulder to shoulder. And sadly for us, it was a cloudy day. We didn't get the full effect, but it was really wonderful, the solar eclipse.
But the place was absolutely packed.
Packed. There were more than 1 million additional visitors.
Oh, my gosh.
It was really incredible driving into the city of Buffalo, which is just outside Niagara Falls.
And which is not a very large city.
No, it isn't. And you're pushed against lakes, so it's very narrow. And it was very, very difficult to drive around. It was unusual to see a place that I know so well to be so busy. And overtourism, even for that short time, was like, wow, this is very unpleasant.
Yeah. On the other hand, I live out in the suburbs, and I happen to be on the road from Wulai to Taipei. So every weekend, people going in, and at the end of the weekend, people going out. So yeah, actually, we are often overwhelmed by tourists as well.
That's a great example of that. That, like, the tunnels going in and out of Taipei, it's just jam-packed, and it's no fun, right? That feeling of over-tourism is very evident even here.
Okay, so let's see what our article has to say about overtourism. Overwhelmed by overtourism. Following the end of COVID-19 travel restrictions, global travel has increased exponentially. Many destinations have seen tourist numbers return to pre-pandemic levels, with the total number of international tourists expected to reach 1.8 billion by 2030. With so many people traveling abroad, the threat of overtourism has become a huge concern.
Overtourism occurs when excessive numbers of visitors overwhelm a location's infrastructure. Examples include large cruise ships docking at small seaside towns or lines of coach buses driving to remote mountain villages. Overtourism leads to environmental degradation and strains on local communities. In many popular cities, landlords are kicking out long-term tenants and turning apartments into short-term rentals. Lines get longer, crowds get larger, and prices go up for everyone in places with overtourism. There have even been mass protests calling for reforms in the tourism industry around the globe.
Various approaches have been implemented to combat overtourism. Some regions have introduced higher taxes for tourists staying in hotels or vacation rentals. Furthermore, many communities have started to limit the number of daily visitors. For example, Venice now imposes limits on the size of cruise ships that can dock in the city. A Japanese convenience store in the foothills of Mount Fuji has put up a barrier to block views in response to annoying behavior such as illegal parking and littering.
Tourists also need to take steps to ensure they aren't contributing to overtourism. Consider traveling during the off-season or at least be a well-behaved tourist. Tourism can significantly benefit local communities if done with thought and consideration.
That is really true, and I did do that earlier in the year. I went down to Hengchun for a week. I got a really great deal on a place to stay. It was perfectly clean, and they had free fruit for us every day. And it was really low priced because I went in the off season.
Right. Yeah, I imagine traveling in the off-season is difficult for some people. Teachers often are kind of tied to summer vacation.
And winter vacation.
But if you have the opportunity to travel in October, if you have the opportunity to travel in March or April, you can really see some wonderful things. I used to be a tour guide in Niagara Falls, and I will say that some of our very best crowds and some of our very best tourists often came in this off-season. They were less stressed. They often knew they were getting a good value, and I often had a lot of fun with those groups.
It's not easy to have fun when people are packed around you. It's just not fun.
4th of July, the American Independence Day, was always just the worst day to be in Niagara Falls. And we would often just ship people like cattle, like cows, get them to the most important spots as early as we could, as fast as we could. Otherwise, they're going to spend their whole day waiting in line. And I tried really hard as a tour guide to not keep my people standing in lines very long.
And suddenly I'm thinking of the 101 building at New Year's.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Do you ever do that?
I did it once, and
that was
I
enough.
have my experience and never again.
Okay. Let's go back to the beginning. Overwhelmed by over-tourism. We've got some repetition here of over, and that gives the title kind of a nice ring to it. Following the end of COVID-19 travel restrictions, global travel has increased exponentially. A lot of great words here. So travel restrictions is a word that we still have to deal with sometimes. Global travel, that means you go out of the country to another country. Increased, because it's a verb, we stress the second syllable. And increase, that's a noun, stresses on the first syllable. Increased is the verb, stresses on the second syllable. Exponentially is a mathematical term. The exponent is, for example, 2 squared is 2 to the power of 2. You write a little tiny 2 in the upper right-hand corner. That's the exponent. So if it's increasing exponentially, it's increasing by times.
Yeah, increasingly more and more rapidly is the way I teach my little kids this one.
Okay. Many destinations have seen tourist numbers return to pre-pandemic levels, with the total number of international tourists expected to reach 1.8 billion by 2030. We're not allowed to speak Chinese, so please take a minute to figure out how much 1.8 billion is in Chinese, because in Chinese, you group the numbers by 4 places. We group them by 3, so it's going to take a little conversion in your head. Make sure you pay attention to that.
The current world population is actually 8 billion people. So by 2030, 1/5 of the world's population is going to be traveling abroad, which is a lot of people.
Scattered all over the place. Okay, so destination is a place that you are intending to go to. Tourist numbers is a compound, so we don't say tourist numbers, we say tourist numbers. And we're finding that in a lot of areas, things are returning to the level they were before the pandemic, but in some areas they are not. A lot of businesses are finding that business is down. For example, I went to the hairdresser's yesterday, and she said the numbers have been down and stayed down since the pandemic of customers. So a lot of stores have closed.
Suli Night Market, which I used to live very close to, so it's a little bit of a personal favorite of mine, I will say has changed dramatically since COVID. I realize there are other factors in the area why Suli is smaller, but almost all of my favorite restaurants have closed. Many of the reasons that I would go to that night market have just never been the same. But I will say this year in particular, I have noticed more international tourists in Taiwan, but I also realized Taiwan had travel restrictions much longer than many other places.
That's right. I always feel bad when someone goes out of business.
Oh, yeah, me too.
I'll see a new restaurant. I thought, how long do you give that one? I think they're a little too ambitious, or there's too many restaurants in the area, and you see them close, and I feel really sad.
I do too. What? That's just funny. I always thought that was like a me thing. I'm like, I feel like this is an irrational behavior because businesses do go out of business, but think of the passion and love that went into it, and then
That's
it fails.
Right. And the money.
Oh, my goodness.
And the money, yeah. My father was a small businessman. He ran a printing shop with his brother, and he taught me a lot about business since I was a kid. And one was, he says, it's something like only 1 out of 10 businesses really makes it over the long term. I don't know if that number is right, but a lot of them fail.
Yeah, I think the point stands.
Right. With so many people traveling abroad, the threat of over-tourism has become a huge concern. Okay, now with so many people traveling again, there are just too many people in one place.
Be careful of this verb travel and then the word abroad. Words like abroad and overseas do not use to. So you might travel to America or travel to Mexico, travel to Europe, but we travel abroad, travel overseas. This is one of those GEPT questions that I know have tricked somebody at some point.
Just view it like going home.
Yeah.
We don't say going to home, we say going home.
Let's go to our next paragraph here. Over-tourism occurs when excessive numbers of visitors overwhelm a location's infrastructure.
When you see infrastructure, what's the first thing you think of?
I think bridges and roads.
When I say it by itself, I also think of bridges and roads. But in this context of tourists, the first thing I think of is toilets.
Well, yeah, I agree with that. We're talking specifically about tourism infrastructure, and that means like bathrooms and water fountains and restaurants. I agree with that, yeah.
Especially toilets, because when you need one, you really need one. And if there isn't one nearby, or if there's a long line outside of it, you're in trouble.
The whole pay for a toilet thing, I'm so over it. There's a lot of things that I think America could do better, but one thing America does do well is that there are usually a good number of toilets, at least somewhat available. I will say in Europe, in maybe Taiwan, they could do a better job of having a toilet here and there. But it has gotten better over the years.
It's gotten much better, and they're much cleaner now, and they often have toilet paper and soap. They didn't used to, by the way. For you young people, you may not know this time when there was almost never toilet paper in the public bathrooms.
And they even don't often have spiders on them anymore. So one time I went to like a tourist bathroom, one of those giant spiders was sitting on it. Oh, my God.
That's right. Also, I think largely in response to the number of Muslims in Taiwan now, especially from Indonesia, a lot of bathrooms now have sprayer hoses, which I think is wonderful.
I agree. That's a very good point. That's something that I've seen and never made that connection until just now. That's a wonderful example of kind of Taiwan thinking about who their tourists are or people coming to work.
People who live here.
That's right. That's a wonderful example. I've never made that connection.
That's right. And in the States, I've seen a lot of articles that were really late to the game in America because, gosh, you get so much cleaner with water. Why didn't America use this solution sooner? And you save so much toilet paper.
Yeah. Excessive is a good word. Excessive just means too many. We have too many people here visiting this one location.
If there's a little kid kind of bouncing around, we might say he has excessive energy.
Yeah. Let's go to our next sentence here. Examples include large cruise ships docking at small seaside towns or lines of coach buses driving to remote mountain villages.
Now I'm really thinking of toilets.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially cruise ships. It's not just the towns that get overwhelmed. The cruise ships kind of overwhelm the ocean. They just dump their waste into the ocean.
So I was curious. I know cruise ships can be very large, but I wasn't quite sure. So I looked into it. Apparently, a large cruise ship is 9,000 people. So 9,000 people, we need to be honest, everybody poops. And 9,000 people is a lot of waste. And just as Karen says, that goes in right into the ocean, or they get off at a small town they all got to go to the bathroom. They all got to eat. And this is very overwhelming for a tiny area. Remote mountain villages means a place that is far away from main population centers. Usually you think of your TV remote. You are not sitting at your TV and twisting the knob as you might have done when you were a kid. You're sitting far away, so you are remote.
Right. So remote here just means far away from the places that people usually live, like big cities. And so when I think of coach buses, I have been on many coach buses, so we have to stop often, and then you overwhelm the facilities.
All right, let's take a look at our next sentence. Over-tourism leads to environmental degradation and strains on local communities.
That means wherever you have too many people in one place, especially in a place that was not built for so many people, you're going to be hurting the environment. Degradation means you're making it worse and worse. And then it says strains, and here strains is used as a noun. I mean, we often use it as a verb. For example, you have to strain that drink to get rid of some of the pulp in it. So to strain is a verb, but strain here means it's causing discomfort or causing damage or causing problems. It's overstretching their resources. So it's causing environmental degradation. It's also causing strains on whom? On local communities, these smaller communities.
Let's go on to our next sentence here. In many popular cities, landlords are kicking out long-term tenants and turning apartments into short-term rentals.
And this is happening everywhere.
Yes, this is the Airbnb problem, isn't it? What a wonderful idea that has turned into a monster.
Yeah, that's true. I appreciated it when I was in France, in Grenoble, because I got a whole apartment. It was really wonderful. Short term, while I was there for like 5 weeks, wasn't short term, but maybe other people will have trouble finding an apartment because they're being rented out to tourists.
Yeah, so a tenant is a renter, and short-term rentals, let's just say it, it's an Airbnb. My friend in New York City turned the second floor of his home. So his parents had two homes, and so he got a home. He's my age, and he has a whole home in a great neighborhood in Brooklyn, in New York City.
Oh my gosh, that's really valuable.
Very
and
valuable.
Nobody can find apartments, especially affordable ones in New York City.
And he turned it into an Airbnb.
Wow.
New York City ended up making Airbnb illegal, so now he just has a room that magically gets rented out.
Yeah, I bet a lot of people did that.
I hope he doesn't get in trouble for it, because he will get in serious trouble doing this, because people need homes. And if you're just renting out everything as a hotel room, rents go up, and this makes living in a city almost impossible sometimes.
Right.
Let's go on to our next sentence here. Lines get longer, crowds get larger, and prices go up for everyone in places with over-tourism.
I only need to see one word, and that's crowds, and I want to stay away.
Yeah,
I hate crowds. Yeah.
There have even been mass protests calling for reforms in the tourism industry around the globe.
You can try to reform it and change it, but people often have free time at the same time. It's really a hard problem to solve. All right, next paragraph. Various approaches have been implemented to combat over-tourism. So now we are trying to mitigate the problem. All right, I gave you a very hard word. Mitigate means to make it so it's not quite as serious or bad. It's M-I-T-I-G-A-T-E, M-I-T-I-G-A-T-E, to mitigate the problem. Some regions have introduced higher taxes for tourists staying in hotels or vacation rentals. I don't like that. It's going to be more expensive for me.
So just before we go on, I wanted to look at the word combat, because especially if you're a gamer, you're going to talk about fighting, and another word for that is combat. That's the noun. I think the way Karen stresses this is really important, especially to you gamers out there, because we often talk about fighting as a noun. We don't talk about the verb. We would use a different verb to specify how you're doing the fighting. You're shooting, you're punching, you're kicking. So this is to combat. This is to fight against something. Be careful of the way you say this verb.
Right. Okay. And we're talking about higher taxes. Well, maybe the government will be earning more, but the tourists will be paying more. They do want to discourage them. But for the tourists, man, it's not nice. And also, I think that your example of your friend is probably typical. He's not the only one doing that.
Oh, no, he's not. And then that's exactly why New York City has decided to limit and eliminate, in many cases, Airbnb or short-term rentals from the city.
Furthermore, many communities have started to limit the number of daily visitors.
There are many examples of this all over Europe. The Louvre, of course, the incredibly famous museum in France, has decided to limit the number of visitors to 30,000 a day. So it behooves you, it really is useful for you to jump on their app and order your tickets early. Otherwise, you might not get into some of the most iconic places in Europe.
And don't go there on a Monday.
It's closed, right?
Yes. Yeah. This has happened to me twice with a museum I really wanted to go to. One was the Louvre on a Monday. Another one was the Exploratorium in San Francisco, because I use one of their exhibits in my teaching. So I was there on a Monday, and they were closed.
I don't know why I know that. I know it's closed on a Monday. There must be just something I read once, and it just stuck in my brain.
A lot of museums are closed on Monday. Keep that in mind. For example, Venice now imposes limits on the size of cruise ships that can dock in the city.
Yeah, specifically places like Venice, they just cannot afford to have these cruise ships dock anymore. The Dutch are known for doing this. Amsterdam is turning into this. In fact, if you are a young British male, and you start searching terms like pub crawl, there will be these advertisements from Amsterdam saying, don't come here. We don't want this here. So places are becoming more proactive about saying, stop doing this.
And they tend to be troublemakers besides.
Yeah.
They get drunk and they get in fights. A Japanese convenience store in the foothills of Mount Fuji has put up a barrier to block views in response to annoying behavior, such as illegal parking and littering. That's big in the media right now.
We cannot have anything nice.
That is a cliche now. We say it a lot, but you should be familiar with it. That's why we can't have nice things, because people ruin them.
Yes, that's true. All right. Our final paragraph today. Tourists also need to take steps to ensure they aren't contributing to overtourism.
So as individuals, there are things we can do as well.
Let's take a look. Consider traveling during the off-season, or at least be a well-behaved tourist.
Okay, like I mentioned earlier, you get good deals when you go in the off-season.
Yeah, I feel like also you're either a good tourist or you're not. You probably follow these good rules or you don't. Tourism can significantly benefit local communities if done with thought and consideration.
So it's not all bad. We just need moderation. Don't overdo it. We have 3 questions for you. Number 1, why has the number of tourists increased drastically in recent years?
Letter A, plane ticket prices have been dropping.
No, they've been all over the place, going up and down with no warning. B, global pandemic restrictions were lifted.
That's the correct answer there. Let's just look at C. C, countries are promoting themselves online.
They always are.
And letter D.
People have more money to spend on traveling. They may or may not. There's no way of knowing that one. So B is the correct answer. Number 2.
Which of the following people may be contributing to overtourism?
A, Billy is buying souvenirs from local stores. This is totally normal behavior. Nothing wrong with it.
Letter B. Tracy travels to different places on business every year.
That's not even tourism. That's a business trip. Letter C. Willie prefers to wake up early to be the first person at a site. At least that way you can probably avoid some crowds.
And letter D. Peggy is going to travel abroad during the upcoming holiday with everybody else, so that's overtourism.
That's it. Okay. Number 3, what is the author's attitude towards tourism?
Letter A. Visitors can positively impact local communities with proper approaches.
And that is the correct answer. B, domestic visitors alone are enough to support the tourism industry. That's not true. You need people from abroad in most cases.
C, there are no solutions once overtourism occurs. No, there are solutions.
That's right. And D, foreign visitors bring only disadvantages. Oh, that sounds bigoted.
That's a horrible answer.
And bigot, B-I-G-O-T. A bigot is a person who just doesn't like certain people for no good reason. And it's also used in the ED form, bigoted. He's bigoted. That means he just has a prejudice against certain people.
Okay, overtourism. Where are the places to go if you really love big crowds? Number 1 is Phuket in Thailand. Number 2, of course, is Venice in Italy. Macau, Rhodes, Greece, and Miami in the USA also top the list. Phuket in Thailand is officially the world's most overloaded city. There are 118 tourists for every one local. What an incredible number. Yes. 118 tourists per local. It's just a crazy number.
It never occurred to me to go to Phuket when I was in Bangkok. I don't recommend it. Okay, that's all we have time for. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.